George! I've been liking your new Dragon show. House of the Dragon Season 2 has been pretty fantastic so far. Maybe not, we'll be able to go ahead and reassess it at the conclusion of Season 2, but right now, that's about on par with Season 1. Might be a little bit lesser, okay, but Episode 4 was quite a banger, and Episode 5, I'm sure that there's probably the critics that are out there going, oh, it's slower, oh, what's wrong, it's boring, there's not enough spectacle, there's not enough dragon fights. It was so ridiculous, okay? In the afterglow of Episode 4, when it came out, when it was that big battle at Rook's Rest, if you don't know anything about that, that's not really a spoiler, but know that something fairly consequential happened in Episode 4. It was immediately ranked as one of the 10 best Game of Thrones related episodes of TV ever produced. And yeah, it was very good. It was exceptionally good. Not as good as Episode 8 of Season 1, but different horses for different courses. I wouldn't fault you for putting it ahead of Episode 1. I would just say that, you know, in totality, I prefer what Episode 8 had on to offer. And that's not to put down what Episode 4 did. But then I take a look at the rest of the list of what everybody else ranks on that top 10 list, and I'm seeing names like the Battle of the Bastards. I'm seeing Beyond the Wall. I'm seeing The Door. I'm seeing Hard Home, which, yeah, a lot of people point to as like, that's the definitive White Walker episode. Exactly. And I'm incredibly inclined to agree, rather. And that is definitely a high point of the otherwise dreary Season 5, but you have to remember that there's a first half of that episode, and oh boy, it's not good, okay? Consult your mind, consult your memory. It will not betray you. But while people are generally of the opinion that, oh, it was just Game of Thrones Season 8, Season 8 was when everything really fell off the cliff. Right after The Long Night, man, everything, it was just what a cataclysmic drop-off. Again, I'm of the opinion that everything really started to fall off a cliff right after, you know, Season 4, Episode 9. So happens that Watchers on the Wall is arguably the best episode of Game of Thrones, full stop. You know, Blackwater and the Battle of Blackwater and Baelor and House of the Dragon Season 1 Episode 8, it's all right up there. I can't remember the name of that episode, but they're real good, mostly because they do this weird thing, right? Because for as much as he is a lazy sack of old shit, when he does put pen to paper, George R.R. Martin, there's very few that have done it better than him. He'll never do it better than Tolkien. He'll forever be Tolkien's bitch. But hey, in second place to the GOAT is not all that bad at the end of the day. Strict adaptation of the work from Fire and Blood. Simple Histories book is what's making House of the Dragon so good. What made those first 4 and change seasons of Game of Thrones so great was following the work of George R.R. Martin. And this is a topic that he's discussed a couple of different times. It's just he kind of had to run back this talking point because the last time he discussed that he had somebody else on stage with him who's currently going through a minor cancellation. Might have heard of Neil Gaiman's current issues, or maybe you haven't, because the entire industry, it's so funny, right? Like the comic book and the comics industry at large, and know who's useful, know who still has juice in the business, and want to go ahead and sweep that under the rug. I don't know much about the subject. I'd have to do my own research on it. It's very, very funny how mainstream media is reporting that subject and how they would for anybody else that's out there. But I digress. Let's talk about what George, somebody who I don't think physically could move fast enough to do any essaying, but he was out there, yes, talking about canon, its importance when it comes to adaptations, and Game of Thrones creator George R.R. Martin warns creators, ignore canon, and the world you've created comes apart like tissue paper. And this rings especially true, especially now that we live in a post-Acolyte world, and, well, what they did with Plagueis and Jedi Council is like, okay, cool. You wanted to go ahead and you wanted to set your goofy-ass Star Wars story ahead of everything else that's in the canon just because you wanted to be special. Okay, Leslie, go back to the last seat on the short bus. Game of Thrones creator George R.R. Martin issued a scathing warning to Hollywood creators and others that if they ignore canon, their world or worlds they are adapting will fall apart. Well, yeah, exactly, because as he talked about before, okay, very few times, okay, throughout history has somebody gone to adapt a written or a previous work and they have done it better, that they have added anything to it. So much as I think that that's him also trying to distance himself with any of the stench of later day Game of Thrones and thinking that his work is somehow more important, even though it's not finished. Finish the books, George! It's still a salient point, because yeah, you can probably cherry pick examples of different adaptations that have done it better. None immediately come to mind outside of House of the Dragon, which even George, and he is in the writing room, okay, so It's kind of a soft adaptation because he's adding the supplemental material because, again, this is a histories book originally written by 3 unreliable narrators. The show is supposed to be the definitive take of this time period in Westerosi history. He's admitted that, well, specifically, Viserys Targaryen's interpretation by Paddy Constantine is better than the Viserys he wrote in his book. But outside of that, I mean, like, how many other poor man's Marvel, DC, Star Wars adaptations do you have to look at and go, yeah, that shit's trash, bro? In a new blog post, Martin discussed the dragons in Game of Thrones and compared and contrasted them to other various dragons such as J.R.R. Tolkien's Smaug, forever living in J.R.R. Tolkien, Shadow, huh? And Vermithrax Pejorative, really, in Dragon Slayer, as well as Toothless and How to Train Your Dragon, among others. Interesting. After detailing how adaptations of a series got the Targaryen heraldry wrong by including dragons with 4 limbs rather than 2, Martin asserted, fantasy needs to be grounded. It is not simply a license to do anything you like. Smaug and Toothless may both be dragons, but they should never be confused. Ignore canon, and the world you've created comes apart like tissue paper. Yeah, exactly. Once you establish something, you should probably stick to it. How about that? Really difficult concept for a lot of creatives, and I use that term very loosely in Hollywood. These comments come about a month after Martin bashed Hollywood screenwriters and producers for believing that they can improve on source material of standout authors such as Ian Fleming, Stan Lee, J.R.R. Tolkien, and others when they attempt to adapt their stories to film or television, he wrote on his blog. Everywhere you look, there are more screenwriters and producers eager to take great stories and make them their own. It doesn't seem to matter whether the source material was written by Stan Lee, Charles Dickens, Ian Fleming, Roald Dahl, Ursula K. Le Guin, Tolkien, Mark Twain, Raymond Chandler, Jane Austen. Look at me, I know all these authors. Or, well, anyone. I don't want to name myself because, oh god, I'm very humble. I'm like the most humble author. I'm like, of all of the living authors, I've got to be the most humble one that's out there. So I would never name myself among the rest of those greats. Oh, heaven forbid, I'm still living, unlike everybody else on that list. But no, I would never put myself on that list. And no matter how major a writer is, no matter how great the book, there always seems to be someone on hand who thinks he can do it better. It's kind of funny that he didn't mention probably the most successful living author right now, J.K. Rowling, but I don't think anybody's confused her for writing great literature. There always seems to be somebody on hand who thinks that they can do it better, eager, and take the story and improve on it. And yeah, from all the Harry Potter book fans that are out there, including 50 Cent, you know, read a Harry Potter book. Anyways, with the announcement that HBO is going to be adapting every book into a season of high-quality television, there's a lot of stuff. I didn't read any of the books. I'm actually a pretty moderate-sized fan of the movies. I thought most of them, from about 3, and I kind of waffle on the quality of Prisoner of Azkaban moving forward. I think are pretty good films, but yeah, if there's a bunch of missing material, if there's a bunch of missing storylines that are in there, and that you can especially flesh out that I hear a lot of when it comes to Half-Blood Prince, I'd be down for that, 1000%. Carry over the vision from the author as intended. It's really not that difficult, but it seems to be for a lot of creatives in Hollywood. They never make it better, though. 999 times out of 1,000, they make it worse. However, he did note that sometimes they do indeed get it right, and he praised FX's recent Shogun adaptation. Once in a while, though, we do get a really good adaptation of a really good book, and when it happens, it deserves applause. I can come across as one of those instances recently where I binged the new FX version of Shogun. But yeah, exactly, as I made clear a little bit earlier, that the exception doesn't disprove the rule. Yeah, Shogun, great adaptation for as far as I've heard. Didn't watch it, don't really have any intention to watch it. But yeah, in general, and most people know, whenever you see something is based on somebody else's work, you already know that more than likely the source material is going to be at least more comprehensive, if not just outright better. Later praised, I think an author would have been pleased. Okay, the old and new screenwriters did honor to the source material and gave us a terrific adaptations, resisting the impulses to make it their own. Yeah, exactly. Martin made similar comments back in 2022 alongside novelist Neil Gaiman, but we don't talk about him anymore. We just talk about George R.R. Martin and the fact that, yeah, even a fat clock can be right twice a day. Finish the books, George. We've just passed the 13-year anniversary. Yes, 13 years since he released A Dance with Dragons. But hey, to be fair, okay, it's not like he had about 2 years when the entire world and his entire industry that he's dedicating so much of his time to now, it's not like they were completely shut down where he had nothing better to do but just simply write. And every time that he gives an update on the Winds of Winter, it's always, oh yeah, I just ended up, editing out a bunch of other pages, so we're down from like 1,000 the last time that I gave you guys an update. Those books are never going to come out. You might get one, but a dream of spring, yeah, brother, it's staying as a dream. So with all that said, thank you all very much for the gift of your time. I've been Don Consuelo. I want you to follow your gut and get after it. Take care, everyone.